All right, we're back on State Your Case. I'm George Korda. This is Newstalk 98.7, the news and talk of East Tennessee. And up now, we have Dan Mariaschin, who is the CEO of B'rith International, one of the world's largest Jewish advocacy organizations. And he's in Israel. And in case you're not aware of this, which I wouldn't expect you to be, it's 12:30 a.m. in Israel. So I'm very grateful he's taken the time to do this with us. And Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, George. Yeah, we're into May 5th already, 7 hours ahead here in Israel. But it's really a pleasure to be with you again.
Well, thank you. Now tell me, because I was talking before you came on, that if you go to any American news channel right now, the chances of that story being about Donald Trump and only Donald Trump are extraordinarily high. And if they're not about Trump, it's about somebody who works for Trump. And if it's not about somebody who works for Trump, it's somebody who's criticizing Trump. So all of these other things going on in the world kind of fade into the background because the American attention span has been compressed into about a nanosecond because of all of the different information coming at them all the time. And the media, as I think I've probably mentioned before to you, is, in my mind, is like a team of 7-year-old soccer players chasing the soccer ball. Wherever the ball goes, both teams are going to run after it. And they don't care about position. They don't care about what else is going on. They're all after the ball. And that's kind of the way the national media works. So what is taking place? What right now is taking place in Israel? Is it calmer? Is it more tense? What is happening? Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, there's plenty going on here, that's for sure. And even this morning, which would be Sunday morning here, an alarm went off. You know, the alarms here when there's incoming rockets and missiles and drones, the sirens go off. And we weren't awakened because it was already about 9:30 in the morning. But we soon learned that one of those rockets, which was fired from Yemen by the Houthis — the Houthis are a tribe, a terrorist tribe, Islamist, working for the Iranians, had fired a rocket, and we're talking about 2,000 miles. And this particular rocket was not intercepted, unfortunately, and came down inside the perimeter of Ben Gurion Airport, which is Israel's major airport and a very busy airport, particularly on a Sunday morning at that hour. So that's been the big news here today. And I'm assuming there will be retaliation from Israel. I believe there needs to be and will be. So we'll see what happens over the next 48 hours or so. So that's one issue that we're watching. The second issue is there's still a war in Gaza. Hamas, the terrorist organization which carried out those terrible massacres on October 7th, now about 18 months ago, Hamas needs to be defeated. At the same time, Hamas is still holding 59 Israeli hostages, of which 24 are believed to be alive. The rest of them are remains of hostages that they've killed or died in captivity. So that's the second issue. And the third issue, if I can go back to Iran for a moment, right now the U.S. and Iran are negotiating over Iran's nuclear program. The president has said, and the administration has said, that Iran, and the Israelis, of course, have said that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And so that's going on. We're hoping that the position that we favor in all of this, which is that Iran's entire nuclear program be dismantled so it cannot be a threat to Israel, cannot be a threat to the United States. In addition to the nuclear program, the Iranians are building intercontinental ballistic missiles that not only will be able to reach Israel, but missiles that will be able to reach the heart of Europe, and I suppose as that program continues to grow, missiles that can hit the United States. So that's a big full table here that we're facing here in the Middle East.
So the question about excuse me, what's taking place in Gaza right now, is Israel continuing to prosecute the war against Hamas in Gaza right now?
Yes, it is. It is continuing. Look, you have hundreds of miles of tunnels. And even though the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, have done really a remarkable job in moving through Gaza, destroying the tunnels, destroying arms caches, launchers, rockets. They've taken out many of these terrorists. It is a maze. And so the IDF is continuing, not just to mop up, but to defeat Hamas.
Looks like we lost him. Can you try clicking him back on there?
Roll. Whatever happens after this war is over, that Hamas will have no role in governing Gaza, will have no political role whatsoever.
Oh, he's gone. Now again, we've got a connection between here and Israel, so the chances of an interruption from time to time are probably quite high. So I'm confident Dan is calling back right now. So we'll get him back on because I want to hear the rest of this. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but I'm back.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm not sure what you missed, but the answer...
Let me offer an observation. This is something I continuously point out to people because there's, you notice there's not a lot of American students in the street demonstrating against Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. And they're silent on that issue. But there's a lot of anger. I don't know that it's anger. I think it's more political than anger that's been vented at Israel. And when I run into somebody who is angry with Israel or calls it genocide or whatever it is they want to call it, I point out to them this, that in 2005, Israel had occupied the Gaza Strip, and most of the people I'm talking to couldn't find the Gaza Strip on a map if you promised them $1 million. But they know what Israel ought to be doing. But anyway, I pointed out to them that in 2005, Israel, which had held the Gaza Strip since the 1967 war, unilaterally gave it back. Said, here, it's yours. And Israel removed its settlements, removed its all aspects of its of it being in Gaza, and handed it back to the Palestinians and said, here, make of it what you want to. And what they made it into was a terrorist base that's been terrorizing Israel for the last 20 years. And so that seems to stop people just a little bit, because most people have no clue Israel did that. And Israel used its own army to force out some of its own settlers who had settled in Gaza. They gave the whole thing back to the Palestinians, and they made a terrorist base out of it. But now they still want to blame Israel for trying to take out the terrorist base. So how do you talk to people who are that anti-Israeli?
Well, your history is exactly on target. That's exactly what happened, has happened over the last, if you want to go back to 67, or if you want to go back to 21 years ago, when Hamas actually kicked out the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is that body that runs Palestinian affairs in most of the West Bank. So, yeah, your history is on target. But, there's a lot of, don't confuse me with the facts here, George. I don't want to hear the facts. They don't want to hear what you just said. They are buying into the pro-Palestinian line to the pro-Hamas line. Let's just talk about the students for just a moment. You're absolutely right. Most of these students who are protesting on these college campuses, frankly, couldn't find Israel or Gaza on a map if they tried. But we have to look at who the ringleaders are, who's organizing this, who's funding this. And the ones who are funding and the ones who are organizing, they're the ones who they know what this is all about. They want to see what Hamas wants to see, which is an end to the state of Israel. And if there's any genocide going on, it is the genocidal objectives of Hamas. What did they do on October 7th, 18 months ago? They wanted to kill every Israeli, every Jew in sight, and that's exactly what they did when they went into those the kibbutzim, the communities along what they call the Gaza envelope. They just crossed over, and they massacred men and women and children and babies, and the raping and violence that went on. Everyone has read about and heard about. That is genocidal. And what the Israelis did, the Israelis went into Gaza. It was a defensive war to go after Hamas. And Hamas, it's not an enemy like a traditional enemy that we've seen over many, many years. They don't wear uniforms. They have tunnels. They hide their weapons in mosques. They hide their weapons in schools. They hide their weapons in the basements of apartment buildings. They surround themselves with Palestinian civilians and then basically, dare the Israelis to come in and attack them. They don't care how many of their own people who are killed. Very little value, for if none, for human life. And so what's happened is that this has all been turned on its head. The victim, in this case the Israelis who were attacked on October 7th, are being cast as the victimizers. Let me say one more thing about genocide. To commit genocide, the definition of genocide is an intent to erase or to eradicate an entire people. If Israel's intention was to commit genocide in Gaza, it has an air force which is among the very best in the world. And within 3 or 4 days, there could have been an absolute flattening of Gaza with many, many, many casualties. It did not do that. It sent in its army, and by the way, Israel has lost just on the ground. Israel has lost at this point, I think about 700, almost 700 soldiers fighting on the ground. There's no genocide being committed there. These Hamas terrorists, they hide in hospitals. It is a story of terrorism that the world really has not seen until Hamas came along. So I think that's the long and the short of it. And these students, many of these students, are being used. They're being used by people who have ulterior motives here, and the ulterior motive is to demonize and delegitimize Israel and keep it as an international outcast. And ultimately, their goal is to destroy the state of Israel.
All right, we have to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to continue talking to Dan Mariaschin through the start of the next hour, because we're also going to get into the state of Jews and anti-Semitism in the United States. And I want you to be thinking about this, Dan, for the next hour. I'm finding where not a lot, but where there are Jewish organizations who are angry with Donald Trump for signing orders to fight anti-Semitism. And these are the same people who some months ago were saying when Jewish students were being told don't go to class, or they were being blocked from going into classes, who were saying, why doesn't somebody do something about this anti-Semitism on college campuses? And now Trump has taken action with respect to anti-Semitism on college campuses, and there are some Jewish groups, I don't know if B'nai B'rith is one of them, you don't have to answer right now, who are saying, hey, he shouldn't be doing this. It's making it worse for Jews. So we've got we do need to explore that issue. So we'll talk about that in the second hour. I got something else I want to propose to you when we come back after the break. All right, we're back on State Your Case. I'm George Korda. This is Newstalk 98.7, the news and talk of East Tennessee. And we're talking with Dan Mariaschin, who's in Israel. He's head of B'rith, which is a major international Jewish organization. Dan, what brought you to Israel on this trip?
This particular trip, I came here to speak at a conference covering many of the issues that we're talking about here today. And so I'm over here. That conference is now wrapped up, and we've got a big family over here as well. So I'm going to stay on for a few days and then head back to Washington, D.C.
All right. I may have mentioned this to you before, but it seems to me a perfectly valid response to this whole genocide thing. Because I remember in the past, American leaders saying that Israel's response to terrorist attacks needs to be proportional. And I thought, well, that's an interesting concept. Was our response to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor proportional? Did we sink a few Japanese ships and say, okay, don't do that again? No, we spent nearly 4 years, a lot of lives, incredible amount of money to say, Japan, unconditional surrender. We didn't look at proportional as an option. And so when I talk to people who say, "Oh, the Israelis are doing terrible things and they should ratchet it down and etc.," I say, "Well, look, let's say this: you're in the White House, you are responsible for national security, and terrorists come across the border from Mexico or Canada, and then they'll say, well, nobody would do that." I say, that's not the issue. Listen to me. Terrorists come across the border and kill 40,000 Americans, which is the equivalent of the number of, on a population basis, of the number of Israelis who died on October 7th, 2023. I said, so they kill 40,000 Americans, they rape American women, they butcher American babies, and then they go back across the border to what they think is their safe haven, and they take American hostages. You're in the White House. You're responsible for national defense and security. What do you do? What do you do? And they clam up. They shut up tighter than a clam. Because what they don't want to say is, well, I'd go in and I'd end that threat. They don't want to say that because it means Israel's right. So they come up with some, either they get quiet or they get angry and say, you're just trying to justify Israeli genocide. I said, no, answer the question. Because Israeli leaders had to face that question. And it really does make them shut up. And that's just an observation that might be of some value.
Well, it is of tremendous value because you've explained it extremely well. Look, we went thousands of miles across the Atlantic and across the Pacific to defeat enemies that needed to be defeated. I mean, this is no question about it. And you're absolutely right when you talk about disproportionality. You know, the way I look at it is the reason you raise an army, the reason you fund an army is to be able to defeat your enemy. And it has to be a complete defeat. That's why you have to be better than your enemy. You have to be stronger than your enemy. That's one point. Second point is, there's John Spencer. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's the urban warfare expert at West Point. And Spencer, early on, after October 7th, after the massacres in Israel by Hamas, he was looking at these casualty figures that Hamas was putting out about how many people were being killed as a result of the Israeli retaliation. And he said, in the history of urban warfare, the correlation between combatant deaths and civilian deaths is the lowest in modern history. Israel goes out of its way to make sure that it avoids inflicting civilian casualties. I mean, they send text messages to the people. They send emails. They have this knock on the roof, they call it, this little flash bomb that goes off to warn people to get out of the way. And still, Hamas doesn't care. They don't care. They don't care how many of their own people die. In fact, to them, the more who are killed, for them, the better it is, because they know that in the court of public opinion, as we've talked about on university campuses, for example, or in the media, in the court of public opinion,
it makes Israel look like the bad guy. All right, we got to get out for the top. We got to get out for the top of the hour news. We'll rejoin you in about 6 minutes, so stand by. We'll be right back on State Your Case. All right, welcome back to State Your Case. I'm George Korda. This is Newstalk 98.7, the news and talk of East Tennessee. We're talking to Dan Mariaschin, who is the chief executive officer of B'rith International, which is an international Jewish advocacy organization. And I wanted to explore here, Dan, the last year in October, it was October of 2024, you said that Jew hatred, I'm looking at the article here, was the worst you had seen in the United States. What is driving that, do you think? Aside from the war.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Look, I think that the war has had a big impact on it, but the number of incidents which has skyrocketed since the October 7th massacres, that started before that. I mean, for a decade, for 15 years perhaps. The amount of anti-Semitic incidents had been rising, and now, as I said, it's gone way up. Well, driving it, I think social media drives it. I think that we have anti-Semitism coming from the left. We have anti-Semitism coming from the right. It's kind of like a perfect storm. Israel is looked upon, and those who support it in a way that castigates Jews, whether they be on campus or if they're in any other place. So a lot of it is driven by social media. I had said earlier when it came to discussing all of the problems on campus that we've seen, where is the funding coming from and who's directing? And I think a lot of that, I would like to see hearings in the House of Representatives in Washington to get to the bottom of a lot of this activity. I think that needs to be done.
Before the end of the last hour, I had mentioned that there is, as you're pointing out, has been a dramatic increase in anti-Semitic acts. And it reminds me of a social media post I saw one time on the war. It said, this is a certainty. Hamas is to blame for this horrible atrocity. And it was followed by the word, but. And then the whole rest of this thing was about how Israel's done this and Israel done that, and Netanyahu's done this and Netanyahu's done that. So essentially it was Israel got what was coming for it. That was, but they didn't want to come out, I don't think, and say that. So the question becomes, when I see even Jewish organizations criticizing the president taking steps to deal with anti-Semitism on American college campuses, is that criticism justified, or is it simply whatever Trump does, we got to oppose him?
George, we got to go back to the first Trump administration. When Title VI of the Civil Rights Act was enacted, Title VI is that legislation that was enacted to protect minority students on college campuses from hate crimes. And Jewish students were not considered part of that group to be protected. Well, that changed during the first Trump administration. Now, what we have today, and what we've seen over the past 18 months, is this tremendous, all the floodgates are open for all of these protests. We're coming to a point now where students their security is endangered. When you talk about free speech, that's not the only story here. Free speech does not include intimidating, bullying, encouraging the physical violence against Jewish students. And so what the administration has done here by going to these universities, some of them are majors, some of them are not considered, among the elite universities, but it doesn't make a difference. I think the administration is looking at 50 or 60 universities. They're saying, listen, we want to eradicate this problem. We want to address this problem. And if you're not going to address it, and there are federal funds that are involved in terms of research grants and other kinds of money which go to American universities, which normally would be a good thing and an important thing. Well, there's no obligation of the American people, or no obligation of any administration to keep these funds flowing if you're not going to protect Jewish students. I have to tell you just one thing. I saw a sign a couple days ago, which it was in a picture from the multicultural lounge at Harvard University, and somebody had put up a sign in the door of the multicultural lounge that said "Zionists not allowed." Now, these young people who support Israel, they love Israel, they travel to Israel. Israel means a lot to them, some of them because of religious reasons, some of them because of other reasons. If you say that, there's a Zionist-free space or Zionists are not allowed, it's reminiscent, frankly, of what was going on in Europe in the 1930s, in country after country, in Nazi Germany and throughout Eastern Europe. So what the administration is doing, listen, I'm one who I don't like to dig in terms of motivation and motive. If somebody is saying, I want to deal with anti-Semitism on the campus, if someone says, we're going to take the Department of Justice and we're going to go after those who are not protecting the lives of Jewish students, I mean, how can you be against trying to address this terrible hatred, the flames of which are being fanned constantly by social media?
Well, for example, I'm looking at some headlines here. It says Harvard's president, this is just a few days ago, Harvard's president says the school will not compromise on its rights with the Trump administration, but it also admits that there's anti-Semitism on the campus that it hasn't done anything about. So they're trying to play it both ways. Hey, all you people who hate Trump, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do what he wants us to do. But we've got a problem. We've got to deal with it. Well, they knew they had a problem before Trump was elected. They just didn't care. It didn't matter to them. And if these were black students and white students were blocking their ability to get into class, and black students were being told, you have to stay home because it's not safe for you to come to Columbia's campus or Harvard's campus or whatever campus. And they were black students being jeered at and insulted and whose classes were being invaded. Do you think the media would sit there quietly? Do you think the media would say, well, yeah, but, Israel? No, of course not. There would be justifiably a national outrage. But we're not talking about anything or anyone other than Jews here. And somehow, yeah, it's bad, but and that in effect in itself is a form of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, George, I want Democrats and Republicans both to be outraged by this. This is not a matter of party. It's a matter of what you've just talked about, which is You've got a vulnerable student population here. These kids are on campus, most of them to study, to get a good education. That's what's important to them. And they go to these schools, these elite universities, and to so many other schools. And to make them expendable is simply wrong. And this shouldn't be it shouldn't be a Democrat or Republican issue. This should be an issue for all Americans, because today it could be Jews, tomorrow it could be somebody else. This is extremely important, and if this administration has a program to address this problem, then we should be encouraging the battle against anti-Semitism. That's where the focus needs to be.
All right, we have. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We have to take a break. We'll be back right after this on State Your Case. Welcome back to State Your Case. I'm George Korda. This is Newstalk 98.7, the news and talk of East Tennessee. Thank you for joining us. And we've got a few more minutes here with Dan Mariaschin, so I want to wrap this up on the subject of anti-Semitism in the country and American college campuses, and particularly on college campuses, because what you have are a great many. There's a terrific social media meme that says, if you're a teacher and your students know your politics, you failed. But throughout America's upper echelon colleges, there's this continuing drumbeat from professors and from faculty against Israel, against Jewish people, against Jewish students. People in positions of responsibility on college campuses congratulating Hamas for murdering, raping, and killing. And if they were doing it about blacks, if they were doing it about Hispanics or anybody else, they'd have been out of a job before they could walk off the stage. But it just becomes a news story that kind of goes away. So, Dan, how bad is it, and what can be done about it?
Well, George, I've been doing this kind of work for over 50 years, and I have worked through all of this time monitoring this kind of behavior. Again, I've never seen it as bad as it is. What you say about professors and certain departments at universities, one of the things we have to look into again. Some of the funding comes from overseas. Some of the funding comes from foundations that are simply antagonistic toward Israel or worse. And, these professors who are, to me, this is the most amazing part of it, to be cheering on those who carry out sexual violence against Israelis, and who have this genocidal objective of destroying the state of Israel, and not only just giving them a pass, but endorsing it, calling it resistance, it's not only sick, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And universities, and maybe this is the wake-up call, maybe these threats to withhold federal funds are the wake-up call to university administrators, to trustees, and to alumni, that this simply can't continue. Look, the history of the Jewish people is filled with stories of anti-Semitism in every possible, imaginable way. And one would think, we've been in this country for more than 350 years. The Jewish people have made so many great contributions to the building of American civilization in so many fields. In terms of higher education, some of the great professors, some of the great law professors and history professors, science, medical technology, medicine, all of these things, we have made these great contributions. And then to get the back of the hand of some of these faculty members and to have indifference on the part of the university administrators is frankly, it's beyond belief, but it's happening. And, I'll just go back to one more thing, George, because I know time is short. You remember when Congresswoman Elise Stefanik had the 3 university presidents in front of her, and she said, if there was a charge against the Jewish students, about genocide, that they were accomplices to genocide, would that cross the red line of your code of conduct? And you remember the answer of the president of Harvard University was, well, it would depend on the context. And Stefanik responds by saying, that is not the answer. That is not the answer. And so university administrators and others have got to take it seriously. And I would cover, the media in this, concern that we have as well. How the media treats these student activists who are out there inciting against Jewish students. I mean, there's a lot here to unpack, but we need to take it seriously, and I hope, we can only hope, that a corner has been turned by some of these threats to withhold funding. Maybe it'll make a difference. We'll see.
Yeah, I thought at the time that Claudine Gay, who was the president of Harvard University, I thought at the time that when she was asked at that congressional hearing if someone called for genocide of Jews, would that violate Harvard's code of conduct under bullying and harassment? And her answer was, as you said, well, it depends on the context. And that was a siren going off. And it's just these weeks here, and I don't know of anybody who has ever visited Germany. I lived there for 3 years, and I've been to Dachau. I've been to the site of the former Reich Chancellery in Berlin, where Hitler's bunker was, and I've right across the street where he killed himself. Right across the street is the monument to the murdered Jews of Europe, and that now the country, the nation that helped or was the principal player in bringing down the Third Reich. We've got college professors sitting and saying, well, they're calling for Jewish people to be killed. Well, yeah, it might go against our rules, but it depends on the context. Is nightmarish. All right, Dan Mariaschin, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on the phone from Israel, where it's now, 1:30?
At 1:27 on my phone.
Well, it's greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. We'll look forward to having you back again.
Thank you very much, George. We appreciate it.
Thank you.